Hello, everybody, and welcome. Before we go any further, I'm going to ask Sarah to read us the new. Hello? I'm going to ask Sarah to read us the. Am I getting an echo?
Could I ask Adam to put his on silent? I think it might have been Adam.
Okay.
I'll unsilence myself. People don't usually ask me to do that.
No. Can you silence yourself, Adam? Right. Okay, Sarah.
Okay, thank you for logging in on this Zoom video conference of Audit and Standards Committee. I'm the Democratic Services Officer for this meeting, and I'm assisted by my colleague Craig Rogerson, who is the host for this virtual meeting. We will proceed to introductions and housekeeping in a moment, but just a couple of points to note. This meeting is a public meeting, and in alignment with the new regulations which permits meetings to be held by remote means, will be live streamed for the public to view. To make the meeting run as smooth as possible, can I please ask that participants in the virtual room leave your microphone on mute when you are not speaking. When you want to speak, please raise your hand to the camera or use the virtual hand raise sign. Only unmute when the chair indicates that you can speak. Moving to housekeeping, if at any time any member loses the ability to hear or to be heard, they must alert the chair or the host as soon as possible. You may see members looking away from their screens at times. This is because they will need to look at an additional screen or device containing their papers. I will now hand over to the chair of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So welcome, and we're going to start by welcoming Alison Howard to her first meeting with us. Alison is an independent member, one of our two independent members on the audit committee, and she's here to help and support us in our work and to keep us on our toes. So welcome, Alison. Do you want to say something? Hello? Unmute.
Cracked it. Thank you for the welcome. I'm really looking forward to working with you all. Not much else to say at this moment. Okay.
Do you want to tell us something about yourself, because
can do. I've recently retired from my previous role, which was Chief Executive Officer for Rounders England. So that's the bat and ball sport that you probably all remember from school. And I worked for them for 20 years. Prior to that, I worked for Sheffield City Council, and I was a Principal Finance Officer. So I do have a bit of experience of council finance, albeit it was some time ago. My real interest is governance.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. We'll look forward to working with you during your period with us.
Thank you.
I'm just also going to say a couple of words. As you know, I wasn't at the last meeting, which was very well chaired by Simon. My husband died in March, and it's been a slow process of trying to get back to some normality. But 2 weeks after Howard died, also our lovely colleague, Councillor Pat Midgley, also died from COVID virus, which has hit us all very much. I just wanted to say it would have been Pat's 83rd birthday on Monday, and in order to commemorate her, we had a cream tea of scones with clotted cream and jam, which was the way she always liked to spend her time when she could. So fond memories of a woman who did a great deal for her community and for this council. And I'm sure you all agree that she is a sad loss. Right, if we move on, apologies for absence. Do we have any?
Chair, I've not received any apologies for absence.
Right, okay. Item 3 is exclusion of the press and public, and we have item 9 on our agenda, which we've been asked to take in private session. Now, I know that Councillor Clement Jones raised this as an issue at our meeting, our pre-meeting on Tuesday, and I said I would take advice from Gillian Duckworth, our head of legal and governance, about this. And because what I have agreed with Jill, which I hope you will all agree, is that this agenda item was written by officers believing it would be held in private session, and therefore we should agree that we will stay in private session for this, because that's the spirit in which the report was written, but that I would like us after this meeting to have a discussion about how we feel about risk management and risk reports actually being held in the public part of the meeting. So that's what I'm proposing, if that is agreed with the other members here. Oh, is that you putting your thumb up or wanting to speak, Simon? Right, I'll take that as a thumb up from Simon, and he's grinning at me. So in that case, item 9 will be the one which we take in closed session. So item 4, any declarations of interest from any members? No. In which case we're going to have an item 4B, which is members' reports, and I'm going to ask Angela if she will report on a webinar which she attended run by SIPFA, which was about audit in a time of COVID. And Alison also attended it with Angela. So Alison is also going to chip in with some of the issues that she felt came out of the webinar that will be useful for us all to hear. So Angela, do you want to unmute and off you go?
Yes, thank you. Yes, we attended this webinar. It was a couple of hours long on the 24th of June. And as the chair said, it was organised by the Chartered Institute for Public Finance and Accountancy. It was very interesting because it was very topical. It was very well run and worth attending. I thought it was particularly useful to put in context not just the financial implications of COVID, but how COVID will affect how we present the finances for this year and obviously for at least next year and years to come. Some of the important points were about timings and how deadlines have so shifted. So the draft financial statements and the governance statement, the annual governance statement, are due by the 31st of August, and the publication of the accounts is due by the 30th of November. Also, obviously, because of COVID and its impact, there will be an expectation to provide a financial impact of COVID-19 as a narrative report as part of the annual statements, and also what the impact of COVID has been on the governance in terms of the decision-making process, in particular, the risk management, the capacity and capability of Sheffield City Council, and also, obviously, the challenges of remote working for staff and how it's affected the work, but particularly for what matters to us, how it's affected the controls with home working and cyber resilience of the organizations, and how we're going to cope with fraud and error checks in terms of COVID-19 payments. So it was very useful because it gave us a framework of what questions to ask our officers, to ensure that you know, we are on the right track. Alison, do you want to add anything?
Unmute, Alison.
Apologies.
No, it takes time to get used to it.
Yeah, we both submitted a list of questions, and I was just wondering how they were proposed to be addressed. So will some of the officers be able to answer those questions that we submitted to Abby? And
I don't see why not. What we can do is we can ask them to be answered, and those questions and answers then to be circulated to the entire committee. Would that be what you'd like?
yeah, so yeah, I think we do need a response to them.
Okay.
Yes.
So can we agree that, everybody? Can I see your thumb again, please, Simon? Thank you. Okay. So thank you both for attending and for your reports. And we'll have the questions and the answers as a supplement at the next meeting, although they will have been circulated beforehand. Okay. Right, if we move on to item 5, which is minutes of the previous meeting held on the 23rd of January. And again, my thanks to Simon for having chaired it. So can I have agreement that the minutes are accurate, please? Okay, yes, that looks like people putting their hands up to agree. Or Joe, did you want to say something?
Yeah,
Yep.
6.3, there's obviously a typo there. Councillor Pazak asked whether "and" decision had yet been made.
Right.
It's clearly a decision.
Yeah, or any.
Yeah.
Okay. Apart from typos, are the minutes okay with everybody? Because, yep. Okay, we'll agree those minutes. Then we'll have matters arising. And on page 5, 5.3, I believe Angela had a question she wanted to raise.
Yes, my question was, at last meeting we discussed the handover from Capita to the in-house management of the IT facilities, and there were some question mark concerns regarding how the handover and the information provided from Capita was progressing, and I was wondering whether that is in hand now.
Who's going to answer that? David, go ahead, please.
Shall I start, Chair? I might bring Linda in a sec.
Fine.
But,
that's fine.
Yeah, just to say, yes, handover of things from Capita has been proceeding. As ever with IT things, it's never an entirely smooth process. Specifically in terms of the recommendations, Internal Audit have a process of following up recommendations and reporting to the committee every 6 months, and they were due to do that. Due to the pandemic, follow-up of recommendations has been quite tricky because people's focus in the last 3 months has been on emergency planning and day-to-day delivery of services rather than that. So that sweep up is being deferred into the autumn, and that will pick up the item which was around the fact that because Capita were going, it was difficult to get hold of their officers to chase up for recommendations. But now that things are in-house, Internal Audit will be chasing up on them again. So they will be picking up that at the next meeting. Linda, I don't know whether there's anything you want to add.
Yeah, so we'll bring the report to the October meeting so we can give you an update on those recommendations. And then also for this year's audit plan for 2021 that was agreed June. We've also got some audits on asset acquisitions and disposals. So we'll probably cover some of those recommendations as well. So yeah, there's 2 ways that we can actually cover some of those recommendations that we had that Mike Weston raised.
Thank you, but I'm assuming informally the fact that you're here and we're getting reports means that all the IT stuff is at least working. from the handover. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were there any other matters arising from the minutes? No? Oh, hang on, Josie.
It's been answered, but just to make sure it doesn't get lost again, there was the overall audit of equipment that needed to take place, and I do recognise that with the pandemic, going around workplaces and checking what's there and who's using what is not going to be easy, or even necessarily in some cases possible in the next few months. But again, so that we're not maintaining equipment that we don't need, and so that we can transfer around newer equipment to people instead of the 9-year-old equipment, that's something that could be picked up hopefully as people start to come back to work. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Josie. Okay, we'll move on therefore to item 6, the unaudited statement of accounts. And David, if you can speak to this report, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. Just to pick up on an earlier point that was raised, I have seen the list of questions that were raised by members, and I know that me and various members of my team have been putting things back into Abby to collate them. So it should be no problem at all getting you written answer from those. We're certainly well on with many of those questions, so we'll definitely get those back to you next time. Specifically turning to the statement of accounts, it's worth saying it's been obviously a challenging time for the team this year. Just as year end was almost upon us, obviously the COVID virus hit and we were all sent to work from home. And I'd like to thank Claire and Ruth and their team for working really hard, pulling the accounts together at home, having to share the documents electronically and spend 4 or 5 hours in Zoom meetings trying to sort through balancing things off and that side of things. As has been very helpfully mentioned earlier, the deadlines for preparing accounts were extended to the end of August to recognise the difficulties that they're likely to take, rather than the usual end of May, and the audit deadline is due at the end of November rather than the end of July. That said, the team put the accounts together by the start of July, which I think is a really good achievement, and we've got them all there. I am conscious that there have been some comments more recently from SITFA on the narrative report, for example. We might need to have a little look at that and see whether we extend it for some of the COVID stuff. There is reference to COVID in there, but relatively briefly. And I actually saw some of the SITFA guidance today, which suggests we might need to add a little bit to that. But in general, the accounts are all there and complete and ready for the audit to start. The auditors have begun their initial work going through samples and pulling things out. They are mainly taking a break in August as our teams, and they'll be back full force in September, anticipating getting the audit done in September, October, hopefully, so we won't be in a tearing rush when we bring them back to you in November, but we have a committee date right at the end of November, just in case. In terms of the financial position, the position itself was satisfactory with a £534,000 underspend, which is a pretty good result for the year. It is worth remembering that COVID largely hits us this year. So this year we have a lot of COVID costs, over £80 million worth of COVID costs, and currently a £17 million forecast overspend. So financial pressures in this year are great and will continue to be potentially greater after this year. But in terms of last year, COVID largely didn't affect us. One area, in fact, where it did affect us was we received a significant amount of government grants before the year end that actually sit on a balance sheet because they were received on 30th of March and obviously weren't dispersed out to business and things till after then. So that caused an unusual movement. But in terms of last year's accounts, they were largely not affected by COVID. In terms of the council more generally, we've been running COVID and risks through our incident management group in particular, who received daily originally, I think they're now meeting weekly reports on controlling the council and managing risks, and everyone has been battling it away well. I will pause at that point and just check whether either Claire or Ruth want to add anything on the detail of the accounts, and then we're happy to take questions from members on the draft.
Hi, Chair. I was just going to just formally say that this is the draft unaudited version of the accounts, and it gives you members a first look at the accounts, because it is a very big document. It's very technical, so it gives you plenty of time till the end of November to review and ask questions. It is now subject to audit, so Ernst & Young are remotely working on the audit of our accounts. It will be due for public inspection from the 1st of September to the 12th of October, and that gives members of the public the opportunity to raise questions or queries on them. We will offer the independent training again to members that we have done in previous years. I think members have been keen in previous years to take that opportunity to do that training, and again we'll offer that. But as well as that independent training, myself and the team will be available for any questions, any support or assistance to go through the document between now and the end of November. We're happy to provide that. It just gives you that extra source of information. So like David said, they will be returned to yourselves at the next audit, the November Audit Committee on the 26th of November, where Ernst & Young will report their findings, and we'll hopefully be able to approve the audited version. But in general, if there's any questions at today's meeting, or if you want to email the team, we'll happily respond.
Thank you. Right, hang on, are there any other officers to speak to this report before I bring members in with questions? No? Okay, I've got Josie followed by Simon and Angela, and then Mohammed. Oh, sorry, Maruth. Okay, Josie.
Okay, thank you, Chair. It's again, I'm sure there's an explanation for it, because these levels have been set at this 50,000 for at least 10 years. So I'm just wondering, I'm looking at page 27, assuming we've all got the pages numbered similarly, and it's council's employees receiving more than 50,000. I'm just looking at the first column, which is 50 to 54,999, and that's gone up about 50%. And also the column that's 70 to 75,000, and that's gone up about 50%. I can see on that one, the column below has dropped quite a bit. So it could just be grades of jobs where they've just gone into a next column or something. But if you could just have a look at that and give some background on it. And I was wondering whether just below the 50,000, whether that block has gone down by the same sort of number as that one's gone up. I'm sure there'll be a simple explanation, rather than that we've employed another 28 people at that level. But I think it would be good, rather than have the query later, to have some rationale for it straight away.
Yeah, that's no problem. We can do that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you're exactly right, though. It is that these limits were set at 40,000 about 25 years ago, and the government eventually moved them up to 50,000, and then they sit at the same level. Although we've not had a pay rise of more than 2% in the last 10 years, and a number of years at 0%, gradually over time, people will move up into the next banding on here. And in particular, our senior finance managers and our grade 11s more generally will be moving up into the 50 to 54,000 band now, as they just sneak over 50,000. And I suspect some of them, our director grades, will have moved from just under 70,000 to just over. So it will just be gradual creep up of salaries. We certainly, to my knowledge, haven't employed a load more staff at any grade at all over the last year. So I don't think that's it. But it's a good spot that these things do move up gradually. And you know, personally, I wish if the government was dedicated to eliminating a bit of bureaucracy, they would somehow index the limits upwards, so that we were catching people at the correct, more senior grades, rather than as it is now. It will move gradually down, further and further down through the organisation, and we'll just have more and more people reported each year.
And that's what I thought it would be, but again, it might be good so that people externally can see that. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so you're suggesting we have an explanatory note on it?
Yeah,
Josie?
yeah.
Okay, thank you. Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, if I can refer to page 22, which is reserves. We talked for most of last year, whenever we had a meeting, about the use of reserves. So I'm just wondering if you can walk me through kind of what happened in reserves if we got to where we needed to, if we went over, if we went under, and does this include any allowance? I mean, did the impact of COVID impact on reserves in what you're reporting here?
Okay, I'll come back in the first instance on that one, Simon. You're correct. COVID did have an impact on reserves because we had, stretching my memory, and Ruth might be able to give me the exact figure, I think 30 million of grants sitting on our balance sheet at year end, and they went in a specific earmark reserves. So they make our reserves look like they moved up a lot in year, but that was money that, until mid-March, until nearly the end of March, we didn't know we'd get in terms of funding through for us on COVID. More generally, our reserve position was relatively satisfactory last year because we had relatively benign settlement towards the end of the year, and we managed to control spending fairly well. I would have been in a, I was hoping to be in a relatively comfortable position at the moment of expecting us to have got the government's 4-year spending review, had we not had COVID, hoping that would have given us a little pot of money to look to use, and certainly to support transformational change in the council over the next 3 or 4 years. We've talked in previous meetings and to the council more widely about having around about 35 million of reserves available. Unfortunately, COVID means that we're going to need all those and more, unless we get significant more government funding to recover the position, both to cover the short-term costs, which I'm confident we can cover in 2021, but also we have medium-term costs in terms of needing to provide care slightly differently, in terms of more PPE, in terms of more trouble family spend and children coming into care, that side of things. And those medium-term costs, although the government has been recognising a chunk of short-term costs, we haven't yet got agreement on how we fund those medium-term costs, nor how we fund things like leisure facilities, which are shut and losing income, nor how we make up shortfalls in things like our car parking income. So that medium-term position will make quite a dent on a reserve position. We do start off from a relatively strong position, which is the positive message in all of this. So we have some time to cope with this. But so looking backwards, which the accountant do, our reserve position is satisfactory. Looking forwards, it will come under a lot of pressure.
Thank you. Does that answer what you wanted, Simon?
Yes, thank you very much, Dave.
Okay, thank you. Should we move on? Angela, your question, please.
Yes, I have a couple of questions. One of them is for page 21. Just could you explain the variances in the surplus on the corporate expenses and income, and the huge increase in the housing revenue accounts expenditure? Sorry, I made these notes the other day, so I'm just having a look at the numbers again. And the other question is for page, 25. Could you just talk us through the adjustments for the item not reporting to internal management, please? Because there's quite a lot of difference between the last financial year and the previous one. Thank you.
David? Is that David, or is that?
Sorry, I think I have the happy task of handing over questions on the detail to Ruth. So,
sorry, Ruth.
Handle this one.
Yeah, Chair, I can answer these questions. That was a very good spot on the corporate item, because I've looked at this again, and we've noticed that the gross income and expenditure is actually overstated. The net position of 780 is correct for corporate. What we have to do for the accounts is strip out internal recharges, and that was actually a manual error that we've not stripped out. It was 3.1 million, so we've actually corrected that, and that's one for ourselves, my team, to feed back to Ernst & Young that we've done a presentational adjustment on the INE. So the figures do go back to a comparative figure compared to 18-19. So that was just internal recharges that we had to strip them out of gross, so not to overstate those two figures. So we have actually amended that one. So that'll be for the audited version. So thank you for that spot.
Well done,
yes, good one. The next one was on the HRA, housing revenue account, and it has fluctuated a big deal. It's gone obviously from a surplus to a deficit on the INE, and this is just because purely that within the accounts, capital valuations on the council dwellings and on other HRA assets feed into that line. Last year, the Land Registry Housing Price Index actually increased, and we had a rise in valuations on council dwellings, which creates kind of a credit or an income to the HRA, whereas that's completely reversed this year. The Land Registry House Price Index actually decreased, and that caused a fall in valuations. So in effect, it creates an expenditure to that line, which are then reversed out below the line within the remainder of the income and expenditure account. But just purely because of the value of council dwellings, they're in the billions of pounds, it does cause any little fluctuation on council dwellings does have a big impact. So HRA probably kind of goes up and down each year. So that it is purely down to valuations on the HRA. And then I think your third question on the expenditure and funding statement was in terms of adjustments for items not reported to internal management. And again, that is just, it's how we follow the SITFA code that we take, as David said previously, the surplus underspend on outturn, and how we move from that position to the surplus on the income and expenditure, taking into account the accounting adjustments we have to make. So on that one, it will just it's then looking at schools, reserve transfers. So again, as David said, that the big fluctuations in reserves this year, just because of mainly because of the COVID-19 grants that came in, just over 30 million, will impact on that. And then there's other little adjustments within there that we have to, in terms of following the SITFA code, adjust for bad debt and HRA and things. So it is just the movement from the prior year to the current year. But I'm happy to provide the detailed figures behind that, if that will be helpful, just to show the actual movements rather than just giving the description of the movements. We can provide, along with the other question on officers' remuneration, we can provide the detailed figures behind that, if that helps. But hopefully that answers all three questions.
Now, Angela, are you content, or do you want to come back? Oh my gosh, everybody's doing thumbs tonight. Okay, thank you very much, Ruth.
Thank you.
Sorry, Maroof, you wanted a question.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. There's a couple of questions and a few observations as well here. And I think Josie's picked up on a few of the comments that I was going to make around the remuneration of staff. It has gone up quite substantially, so I won't go into that. And in terms of the chief exec and the executive director's salaries, that's quite a substantial amount as well. What might be useful is when people look at these figures, they are quite high, the numbers are quite high. It may be worth just looking at benchmarking with other core cities and giving a reflection as to whether we are in kilter with them or out of balance with them, sorry. That's an observation and possibly a remark that you could probably use within the figures there, because it is quite a high number. The next one, if I may be allowed to do so, Chair, is sorry.
So yes, do carry on. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I thought you were going to. Is around the sort of a very big contemporary issue that's running in the world at the moment, which is around diversity and the BAME community. And I think when you look at figures like this and the number of people who are at that level, it might be an interesting question to ask, is whether, it might not be for us, Chair, this, but I think it's an important thing that we should be aware of, is, and it gets asked quite a number of times, how many members of the BAME community are in those sort of brackets. We know for sure that in the chief exec and the exec directors, there's not. But below that, there is no explanation for that. And I think, if anything, if other authorities are not doing it, can't we be the pioneers in this and looking at this and saying how many people from within the BAME community are in the bracket of 50,000 to 104,999, and that it shows a little bit of, it shows quite a lot of transparency in terms of whether we are actually reflecting the community that we are actually serving. Because at the moment, when the figures are like this, it's easy for people to look at it and say, well, there aren't any. When there isn't an explanation, you can read into it whatever you wish. So I think something like that might be extremely helpful in the present climate. And I think as members, we should be pushing for those sort of numbers. Sorry, Chair, if I've gone off on a tangent there.
No. Did you have? Is that all your questions at the moment, Maru?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I'm not sure who can answer that. Would that be Gillian? And I have noticed your hand up, Angela.
I'll try, Chair. We do have that sort of information. I suppose it's where it's the correct place for it to be published.
Okay.
So I think it's part of our performance reporting, which goes through scrutiny committees rather than it appearing on our accounts. So I would suggest that's probably the correct place for it. I'd have to defer to Ruth's greater knowledge as to whether it's something that's appropriate to include within the accounts.
Okay, so, but we do have that information, so it could be found and sent, well, to the entire committee just for information anyway.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether we have probably the most up-to-date performance reporting for the first quarter of the year's missing, and probably from the last quarter of last year's missing, because it's not been one of the priority exercises. But we should have everything up to December 2019.
Okay. Will that be okay, Maruf?
The reason I'm raising it, because the title of our committee is Audit and Standards.
Yeah.
And obviously, from within if you use the definition of standards, that can sort of reflect the fact that we can actually look at how many people we've got from the BAME community within that bracket of earnings. It may be that we use it as an appendix or something like that, because in performance, I'm not saying it's not there. What I'm saying is people will look more towards the accounts and the diversity of people in that sort of bracket in particular.
Okay.
It's something that's been raised within the communities quite a lot. And as I said earlier, Sinead, it might be the wrong place for me to raise it, but I think it's relevant when we're talking about audit and standards, that we have standards that we apply across the city.
Okay. I don't have any problem with you raising it, and if this isn't the
Thank
right place, we'll find the right place for it to be. But in the meantime, yes, if we could have those figures so that we can have a look at them, that would be great. And thank you, Maruf. Angela, you wanted to come back in.
Yes, can I just add to, thank you, Maruf, for that. I think it's a very valid point. Can I just ask, would we have the information also about how many women, all women, are in that, in those figures? Because certainly at a senior level, there's less women than men. So it'd be nice to have that figure for women as well.
Okay, can we ask for that too?
Yeah, like I said, the performance reporting that's available within the council has that sort of information on it. So I'm sure that we'd be able to do that. As to whether it's appropriate for it to be, sorry, just with regard to the term standards, that's a specific term that relates to member conduct. It's used. It doesn't just mean, it's not the general interpretation of the word standards. It's the standards committee is something specific that's around member conduct. So that's what it means within the title of the committee. Not that I'm saying that we're not interested in standards, of course. We'll see. Yeah, I should be able to get that information to members.
That's great. Thank you, Gillian. Has anybody else got any other questions on agenda item 6? Okay, so the recommendation is that we're asked to note the statements and the keynotes. And we're also going to agree that we would like to have the independent trainer come to talk to us about them as well, whenever that is possible. Is that agreed with everybody? Can I see some thumbs? Thank you. There you are, Simon, your trend setting away there. Okay, item 7. This is Gillian, and this is quite a meaty document. It's a review of the members' code of conduct.
Thank you, Chair. It's the follow-on from the discussion that we had in October, actually, last year. The intention was for this to come to January committee. It was postponed because there was a lot of audit, a lot of finance papers on the January committee, with the intention of bringing it in March, and of course that was then cancelled, and this is our next opportunity. So that's the reason why we've had the delay between the committees. This is an amended code of conduct and a councillor that's councillor's code of conduct and a councillor complaints procedure that takes into account the recommendations from the committee on the 24th of October, and that followed on from the ethical standards workshop that we had in September. So you've got, if we just work through the report, at item 4, just a reminder of what the outcomes were from the workshop. At 5 is a summary of the changes that were agreed, and at 6 the changes to the changes to the code, and at 6 the changes to the procedure. It is a lengthy document because what I've done there is made sure that you've got copies of everything so that you can see how the changes have been actually applied to the documentation. One of the things that we recognised when we were looking at changes to the code of conduct was that there was the LGA were going to be looking at a model code of conduct. They have now put out a consultation, and part of what I'm also suggesting, and we did say that we would review our code of conduct once there was an outcome from this consultation, and we actually get a model code. I think it's appropriate for the committee to submit a response to the consultation. I've forwarded the consultation to all members so they can individually respond to it. A number of officers as well, if they wish to respond. The independent persons as well, they want to respond to it, but I thought if you wanted to do a collective response as the committee based on the information that came out of the workshop last week, maybe the easiest way to do that would be if the committee delegated that responsibility to me in consultation with you, Chair, and we could work together to submit something before the deadline.
I did suggest that we might also ask the other 2 groups represented here, Simon and Angela, to also look at it, just so that, if you like, it's a cross-party response on behalf of the council.
Absolutely fine.
Yeah, are there any? I think, Simon, I think you wanted to ask a question when we spoke on Tuesday. Is that still the case?
Sorry, yeah. So I mean, just to follow on from what Gillian said, if I can ask about if parish and town councillors have been involved in this, and if we've got any direct feedback from that, and if what our kind of role is in helping the parish councils and town councils with these kind of things at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, the parish and town councils were invited to the workshop, and we definitely had representatives from Ecclesfield. I'm not sure the other two actually sent anyone, but we did have representatives, so they contributed to our comments on the code at the time for the ethical workshop. They adopt our code, and I'm the monitoring officer for the parish councils, so there is that connection through. I offer myself to go every year to sit with the new members and talk through the code. Again, Ecclesfield are very keen to engage with me on that, and I've been often to Ecclesfield to talk to them. The other two tend to use the local association, Bradfield and Stocksbridge, isn't it? They have the same clerk that Teresa, and I think she's quite well versed, and she's got connections with the local association. They know I'm here if they need any help, but I'm quite happy to lead them to it. They seem to be operating very well. So yeah, I'm confident that the parish councils are in the loop with it.
Thank you.
Did
you want to ask anything else, Simon? Okay. Are there any other questions on this item? Angela.
Just a quick one. I mentioned this on Tuesday. Will there be training for councillors? Because obviously, with not having an election, we don't have a new cohort. But as this new code of revised code of conduct touches on items like social media and behaviour on social media, which I think lots of our councillors could actually do with some training on. How are we going to ensure that all councillors are aware of, what is acceptable, for excellent standards in public life?
Yep. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, good question. I will make sure that all councillors are notified of the changes. I regularly meet with the group whips, and they know about this and will be. I can talk it through with them, and that's probably, if that's okay with you, is that the best place for me to agree the best way of rolling out training at the moment? It's probably going to have to be done remotely, but whether to do that by way of a video or actually have some interactive, maybe smaller interactive sessions would be better.
I mean, it is possible, isn't it, on Zoom to have breakout rooms and other exciting things. So we could do something like that. I think it would be useful to have cross-party training so that actually everybody gets to talk about it. I'm sure individual groups will do so as well. But does that answer your question, Angela? Okay, Maru, if you wanted to come in again.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just I think Angela has asked what I wanted to ask, and because social media is a big issue as well, and we know what happened a year or so ago, and sometimes people that are completely innocent get caught by it. But the fact is there going to be any support for members as well, in terms of if they get into a situation that is not of their making, or training on that in that respect? Because sometimes when you're, I think I mentioned it in the last committee meeting when I had I don't know whether I can say this or not, Chair, but when I had we had a councillor of the same name as me, and we ended up with all sorts of problems, and I was subject to all sorts of issues at that time without any help from anywhere.
Right. I think in the first place you'd probably talk to your own group whip, but also Gillian is always there, I think, to help and advise. Would that be right, Jill?
Yeah, that's right. And Democratic Services team will always pick up your calls, and if you're struggling for whatever reason to get me directly, but I'm quite happy for you to contact me directly. We do have social media training for members. We do have information governance training that's electronic training, so you know that can be done at any time and ought to be done annually. This is something that you may see coming forward later on, and I think possibly last year as well, about the take up on the training. And I think it's something that we as a management team seriously looking at, how we ensure that the required mandatory training is done. And that's particularly looking at it from an officer point of view. When it comes to members, I've got even less ability to enforce mandatory training. So your support is much appreciated if within your groups, you know, if you can, if there's anything you can do to actually. I would like members to see the training as advantageous to them. That's what it's got to be. It's got to be interesting. It's got to be advantageous. Not a chore. So that's my task. I've got to try and achieve that. But your help in trying to get members to engage would be brilliant.
I think we all ought to see it as development and about our, you know, professional development, if you like, rather than as training.
True,
because we're not very good, but things that we can always improve, then I think that's possibly a way of looking at it. And also, Maroof, if you go to the LGA website, they've got lots of useful training modules on there, particularly around issues for councillors. So it might be when you have a dull, wet afternoon and you don't know what to do, the LGA website might attract you.
No, Sinead, I'm absolutely fine now, but I was a new councillor at the time, and to get embroiled in something that was nothing to do with me whatsoever, it was not a very good experience.
Okay, no, I understand. Strangely, I haven't come across many other councillors with my name.
You're lucky, Sinead. That's good. I'm gonna change it.
Right. If we look at the recommendation.
Sorry, Chair. Could I just come back on the social media point?
Yeah.
One of the things that, and we discussed this at the workshop last year, one of the things that is quite difficult from a standards point of view is the need for a councillor to be acting in their capacity as a councillor at the time when they're operating, and that's a legislative requirement. And often with social media, the councillor is not acting as a councillor at the time when they're on social media. So although it appears to be something that's not acceptable behaviour to general public, and it should be something that I could deal with under the standards procedure, it's not. And that's part of the legislative change that the report was asking for to support. So the model code is suggesting that changes, and that members are acting in the capacity in more cases than when they're in a meeting or actually in having a in the wards, etc.
Okay, thank you. If there are no other questions, can we just move to the recommendations and agree? Recommendation 1 and 2. Number 2 will be also including members of the other parties, just to make sure that we have a cross-party submission. Can I see some thumbs? Thank you, everybody. So we're moving on now to item 8, which is Abby's report. Who's going to speak to this? This is the work programme for the year.
That looks like it might be me.
Is that all right, Jill? I didn't realise it was for me.
No, it's okay, Sarah. Shall we do it between us, perhaps?
Yeah.
So I think we've got here the work programme as we understand it to be, from an office point of view. I suppose it's just if anybody has anything that they think is in the wrong place, or they would like to move, whether you think that actually the agendas are going to be manageable, Chair.
Okay, do I have any comments, ideas, suggestions? Oh, Alison, go ahead.
One of the recommendations that arose from the SIPFA webinar that Angela and I attended was a question around the need to review the local code of governance as a result of the COVID stress test. And I wondered whether that is something that should be added to the work plan.
Right. We have a slight anomaly that we're not an audit and governance committee. Governance sits, I believe, with the deputy leader of the council. But what you're saying makes sense. So sorry, Gillian.
Yeah. If you don't mind, Chair, just yeah, I think we're okay. It's the Code of Corporate Governance that's referred to in the Statement of Accounts, so I think we can link it that way. And yeah, so it's not a problem, and it does get reviewed. But you're right, it's not on the agenda here. So,
yeah, so it doesn't come to this committee.
It can come to this committee. I don't know whether
don't want to create extra work, Gillian, if it's not required.
But the work's done. It's just probably not brought to the committee. So actually, that's probably an omission that's well highlighted there, Chair.
Yeah, no, that sounds fine to me. I didn't want to stand on anybody's toes. You know, let's have longer meetings, I say.
Sorry, Chair.
Can we put it down? Let me see. When would be the most appropriate time of year for us to discuss that? If it's the COVID-y bits, do we need to have done it in our October meeting so that we can learn things from it, or is it because November is the statement of accounts, and I assume that's quite a long meeting, or does it come under the annual governance statement then?
I think
sorry, 26th of November meeting.
It could be done there, and that's at the point in time where we've to say it's been reviewed. So actually that's probably too late, but you're maybe right with the October meeting, because yeah, I'm looking at Claire and Ruth. I think if we said on the 26th of November it needed to be changed, would that create a problem? You want them signing off then, don't you?
If there were amendments to the annual government statement, that would have already been included in the final statement of accounts. So if there were changes, ideally if it went through the October meeting, we've got time to change it for the November meeting, if that works for legal, Gillian.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Josie. Oh, and then Simon.
And we've got plenty of time to look at it, but I was just thinking the January meeting looked a little long, but we do have the spare meeting in February. And if we're looking at the governance statement in October and maybe just doing odd things in November, maybe some of the January things could be looked at in November, or rather than using a spare meeting in February. But you've got time to look at that if that's something you'd like to take away and look at.
Okay, let's have a think about that. Thank you, Josie. Simon.
Yeah, I think we spoke about this briefly on Tuesday, whenever it was we spoke. But I wonder if we could get a report on the work for counter fraud specifically over the last few months around COVID and everything else, just to see what work's been done specifically to sort of counter those everything that's new that arrived on our plates back in March.
Would that be David? Counter fraud?
Yeah, we can do that. We can bring a report on that. We are doing some work on the post assurance checks. So we were looking at fraud risk assessment and do some sampling there. So we will have some things to put in a counter fraud report. So this can tell you what work we've undertaken and then give you some results as to what we found, if that would help.
That would be great. Oh, you've got the thumb of approval there, Linda.
Yeah, no, that's great. So I mean, obviously time scale up to you, but as I say, it might be interesting to see, as I say, what's been done specifically.
Right, okay, thank you.
Right, so can we, with those additions, can we approve the work programme, please? Oh, great, some fabulous thumbs again. Right, and then we move on to item 9. Sorry, can we do, if item 9 is the exempt coming year, and that there's a possibility of additional meetings if our cup runneth over with extra reports. Is that agreed, everybody? Thank you. And then if we move on to item 9, Sarah, I believe you have to, although I haven't got here the words about actually excluding the press and public for particular reasons. Is that written on the agenda somewhere so that I might read it?
I think it's actually on your report, Chair, at the bottom, on your cover page, category of report. I think you've got a paragraph there that you could read.
Okay. So, agenda item 9, the report is not for publication because it contains exempt information under paragraph 3 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended. So do we now give Craig time